Hi, so in this video I want to share with you a lesson planning framework for teaching listening and reading skills. But first, let's consider this idea about what is a teaching framework. So here I have the definition of a framework, and you can see that there are two main definitions. The first one is an essential supporting structure of a building, vehicle or object. Okay, so a framework can be like a literal physical framework for a building or a vehicle or so on. And that's a little bit similar to a teaching framework because it's a kind of general structure that helps to hold everything together. But within that structure, we can change things, we can put different things within it. So that's kind of what a teaching framework is. So a teaching framework is the second definition here you can see in the red box. It's a basic structure underlying a system, concept, or text. Okay, so the teaching framework is the second definition. And it's a teaching framework gives us an idea about a system for teaching, okay? It gives us an overall structure. Within that structure, we can put different language, activities, materials, and so on. But the framework helps us to give like an overall clear structure for what we're doing. So the final point on this slide, each language skill has a different framework or system for teaching. The framework helps us to organize the lesson. Okay, so before we get into the framework for teaching, listening and reading, here is the framework for dinner, just to give you a bit of a fun idea about this. Okay, so first we've got the preparing stage. Here you might be getting the vegetables, chopping the vegetables, getting everything out of the cupboards. You could even go to the shop if you need to get some more ingredients for your cooking. So here is the preparation. Okay, number two is the cooking stage. So now you've got to put all the ingredients in the right places, in the right order. You have to start cooking some things and then adding things. You might be using various ways of cooking, so you have to keep everything moving along and in the right order. So that's the cooking stage. Finally, you've got the eating stage. Okay, so most important point for dinner. You can sit down, you can enjoy the food, you can finish the food, and then it's done. Okay, so that's the framework for dinner, for preparing and cooking and eating dinner. You can see here every step is important. Teaching is kind of similar, right? You have these different stages, the preparation stage all the way to the finishing, kind of the objective of what you're doing. Okay, so let's get straight into the framework of listening and reading then now. So this is receptive skills, and in planning terms, they are similar. So when you're teaching listening comprehension or reading comprehension, the planning for these two different skills is very, very similar because they are similar kind of skills. So a receptive skills lesson can have these three stages. We can think about the before stage, before listening and reading. This is called the pre-stage. We can think about during listening and reading. This is the during stage. And number three, after listening and reading. This is called the post-stage. Okay, so you can break down the overall lesson plan structure into these three stages. Each stage would have multiple steps, different activities, and so on. Okay, so this is known as the pre, during, and post framework. This is very popular and well-known framework for teaching and practicing listening and reading comprehension. It's not the same as teaching phonics and sight words, okay? So those have their own structures for teaching. This is for comprehension scaffolding. Okay, so as we saw in the last slide, we have the before stage or the pre-stage, we have the during stage, and we have the post-stage. Notice the shape that is represented with this. The shape is like a diamond. That is because the during stage in the middle is the main focus, and the pre and the post stages have less focus, perhaps less time. The main focus here is in the middle of the framework, which is different from other frameworks where the focus might be at the end. Okay, so let's have a look at these stages in more detail. What do we need to do before we introduce a listening or reading material in a lesson? Okay, so before we introduce like a reading text or a song or a video, what do we need to do to prepare the learners? Okay, let's have a look. Well, we need to generate interest, very important. Get their interest, get motivation, and get a fun start to the lesson. We need to find out what they already know. This is related to background knowledge, activating schema, and so on. Okay, it's a good idea to find out what they already know. Okay, we can personalize. We can connect the topic to the learner, get the learner's opinions, find out how it relates to their life, get them involved in this somehow. Okay, you can set the context as well. I think this is a really useful idea for teaching. So what is the context of the listening or the reading? What is the kind of wider topic? In what situation or linked situations? What culture? What country? Is this related to history or science or, what is the context of the topic? Okay, activate background knowledge, kind of related to find out what they already know, things like brainstorming and so on. Right, this is a key one, especially if the reading or listening material is a bit difficult. We can pre-teach vocabulary. So you might have vocabulary activities before introducing the main material. Okay, and then finally, just before you go into the listening or reading stage, you can provide a purpose for listening or reading, for example, predicting. So predicting is one of the reading strategies that you can actually introduce and practice before going into listening and reading. Okay, so let's get into the during stage now. This is the main focus of the lesson because you're focusing mostly on listening and reading. So some important points about this: give many opportunities to listen and read. Okay, so if you're scaffolding these language skills, don't just listen one time or read one time, okay? Let learners read again and again and again, or listen several times. Each time, give different tasks. So you might focus on different aspects of the reading or listening content each time. You might have different types of tasks. You can start with easy and progress to difficult. So you might start with kind of very easy general tasks and then later on go into more difficult tasks. Also start with general idea and move to details. So at the beginning you're checking general comprehension, later on you're checking their kind of specific understandings. And the important point here is to give tasks that show learner comprehension. So by doing the activity, students are showing that they comprehend the reading material or the listening material. So one of the easiest ways to brainstorm about this stage that I find is to think about this. Listen and ... or ... Read and ... So what can we put in the ... Think about verbs that we can put here. Okay, the verbs are something that the student would be doing while they are listening or reading. So I've got some examples for you. These are activities during listening or during reading. So let's have a look. Listen and point to the right word or picture. Listen and move your body or an object. Of course, you can change listen to read if you're teaching a reading lesson. Okay, so I'm just going to show you these so you can take a look. Listen and raise your hand, and so on. Lots of ideas. Notice that the verb changes, and that changes the activity that the students are doing. I find this the easiest, quickest, most simple way of brainstorming different types of activities that can be done in the during stage. In the during stage, you want to have several activities that are scaffolded, start easy, move on to difficult, and go from general to specific and so on. Okay, it's a good idea to have different types of materials as well. So having visual materials, actions, worksheets, realia. Try to vary as much as possible here. Okay, so there's lots of ideas there, and I hope that helps you with the during stage. So finally, you've got the after or the post stage. So what can we do after finishing the listening or reading stages? Okay, we can introduce other language skills. So now we've finished with our main language skill, we can move on to something different like speaking or writing, or we could move from listening in the during stage to reading in the post stage. We can apply the target language to a new situation or context. So there might be some language within the listening or reading text that we can use as a target language. We can take that language and apply it to the learners' lives or some kind of speaking activity. We can focus on grammar. Okay, so again, there might be some grammar that comes from the text, and we can take that and go into a kind of grammar focused lesson. Or, especially good for young learners, we can focus on creative things. So we can do things like making a poster or a mask, or drawing pictures and so on. We can connect the language to the world further, or we can connect language to the student further. So this is contextualize and personalize. So we can continue or extend doing those things. Okay, so here are some ideas for activities after we've finished with the listening or reading in the during stage. Notice that these are not for checking comprehension. The post stage, the after stage, is not checking comprehension of the text. This is like an extension, moving beyond the text. So we can do things like role play, debate or discussion for speaking. We can retell the story for summarize, create a new ending. We can do reading or writing tasks. We can sing a song. We can make a poster or a presentation. So there's lots of things we can do to extend after the listening and reading. Okay, so there you have it. That is an overview here of the PDP framework. You can see here the pre-stage, the during stage, and the post-stage. So when you're teaching listening and reading comprehension, think about the PDP framework when you're lesson planning and try to include lots of steps that follow with that work within this framework to help scaffold the learners. Okay, I hope that was useful. Thank you very much.